Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate at the Asia Pacific Financial Forum. This is my first time in Korea, so it's a great honor to be here. Now, Chong Kong Graduate School of Business, just want to say a few words. This is probably the only independent business school in China. Was established by the Li Kaisheng Foundation. Chong Kong, that's the name of his company. This is a business school modeled after U.S. business school. Most of our professors have received PhDs, have been professors at top U.S. business schools. And we're based in China. Our goal is to create a world-class business school focused on China business that will provide insight about China, about how to do business with China, do business in China. So I'm here to give my thoughts, my personal opinion about the future of the Chinese economy. I'm sorry that I don't have PPT because I want to focus on big picture ideas rather than some numbers. Otherwise, you might get lost in the talk. A lot of people are concerned about the future of Chinese economy, and there are very different opinions. Some people are very pessimistic. Well, there are also people like me who are very optimistic. A lot of hedge funds are talking about shorting China, right? So actually, I grew up in China. I left in 1991. I went to America for PhD. At that time, I never thought I would come back to China to live and work. I have a lot of Korean friends in America, and they thought similarly, right? Last year, I came back to China to join CKGSB. I ran into some of my old friends who went to America and came back, and they work in the, different kind of companies as expats. Some of them were saying, I'm going back to America because look at the air in Beijing, right? So some of them complaining the air of Seoul. Right, in Beijing, my son went to international school. He was given an assignment to read the stars, astronomy. He could never finish the assignment, right? Because there was no stars to be seen in Beijing. The air, the food, the traffic, the corruption, and also the Chinese growth model seems to be stopped working, right? So therefore, they decide to go back to America. And my opinion was I choose to stay in China for exactly the same reasons, not the same reasons, but the point is when people think about, make economic forecasts, they tend to make linear projections, okay? They tend to think things will just move as it is, right? But the key thing about economic forecasts is the players in the economy, whether government officials, regulators, or consumers, companies, they would make necessary change given the changing economic environment, right? So I'm a finance professor. If you think about investing in stock market, right? The bottom of the U.S. stock market was in March 2009. That was the height of the financial crisis, right? So when the previous growth model stopped working or has reached a limit, that is the time when government officials or business, they're going to make changes. Okay, so this is the time there are hard decisions will be made, critical reform will be made, and actually it's a time for change, and the change will bring more growth. Just to give you an example, in 1978, right, Chinese economy was on the verge of collapse after the Cultural Revolution, right? So I remember I was a little kid in China. We were extremely poor. We have nothing. My birthday gift would be like a boiled egg, okay? But what happened in 1978? So Deng Xiaoping said, we got to change. If we don't change, it's going to be a big problem, right? And he made a small change. That is, it allows the peasants to keep what they produce, right? It used to be the peasants would work in the commune. Everybody sort of, no matter how much effort you put in, you get the same output. Therefore, nobody put in the effort. And he said, well, just let them keep what they produce, after they submit certain things to the government. And what happened? There was a big increase in productivity, agriculture. I remember, we have more food, better food. And they were making reform. Of course, reform has problems. They run into high inflation, corruption, all these things. Then there was Tiananmen Square, right? I was on Tiananmen Square in 1989. That's when I decided I want to leave. Okay? Again, 1990, when I left, I never imagined things will be so different 20 years later. Why? Because in 1992, again, Deng Xiaoping realized, we have been reforming, but reform has been stalled, and we got all kinds of economic problems. And we're going to keep changing, right? So he went to Shenzhen and he said, we need to keep reform. So what they did? Well, what they did was Zhu Rongji, right? So he made more reform to cut down the state-owned enterprises, and he pushed the entrance of WTO, right? Look what happened 20 years after 1992 reform, okay? So the point is, when we think about the future of economy, we cannot think linearly, because the mechanism, the structure of the economy will change given the challenges you're facing. Okay? Just like what I said, 1992, we cannot forecast what's going to happen in the future. Right now, it's hard for us to think about what's going to happen in the future. My basic point is, whatever has happened in Chinese economic growth in the past 20, 30 years, in my mind, it is nothing compared to what's going to come in the future decades. Why? People say the best days are over. My point is that the best days are yet to come. You know why? Because look at what happened, what China has done, right? 1978, you just let the peasants keep what they produce. You give people right incentive to be productive. The past 20 years was basically we're competing on the global market with the huge pool of labor, right? And the growth was driven by infrastructure, export. These are not real creative, dynamic, innovative sort of economic growth. These are just basically, let me put it in a way it's like you have a great Hyundai SUV. I don't know, 8 cylinders, right? In Cultural Revolution, Chinese economy was like that, but it was pulled by a horse. Okay? All the cylinders were shut down, right? And we just pull and then Deng Xiaoping, the reformers, let's open 1 cylinder. Let's open 2. Okay? There's still a lot of potentials that have not been realized. Okay? So that's my first point. The first point, we cannot just sit here thinking about, the current model stopped working, right? That's when change is going to happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, then you say there are companies in trouble because they're in a dying business. No matter how hard you change, they cannot reemerge. But look at China. Do we think there are potentials of future growth of China? I think there are huge potential. Why? First, think about 1.3 billion people, okay? I don't know how often you go to China. Since I came back to China, of course, sometimes I have gloomy days in Beijing when the air is bad. So I would walk on the street. I walk on Tiananmen Square. I walk on Wangfujing. I look at the people around me. There are all kinds of people. There are rich people, poor people, from countryside, foreigners, right? So one thing I conclude is 1.3 billion people, every single Chinese wants to be rich. You talk to them. Whoever, students, business people, they want to start a business. They want to get rich. They want to improve their living standards. They want a car, they want a house, they want to go abroad, they want to send their kids to college. There's a huge, huge demand for better living standard. Japan's GDP per capita, I don't know, it's like 40,000 US. Korea, 30,000. China, 6,000. Look at the potential. And the Chinese people, I would describe them as economic animal. Okay? This is my term. I think Chinese people are like not pure, like they're economic animal. Like they are willing to work hard, to stay late, to not sleeping, to make money. Okay? That is absolutely true. I cannot say that for any other country, but I can say Chinese, or maybe we Asians are the same. But like there's this huge drive to make money, create wealth. And from an economic perspective, that is a huge engine for growth. Okay? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, there's like, I think if you think about China, right? You go to the East Coast, you go to Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, no difference from Seoul, like Tokyo, like even New York. But if you go to inland China, you go to Yunnan, go to Lanzhou, go to these inland places, there's still huge difference in terms of infrastructure, like the standard of development. So there's still room for growth because of the difference, East and West Coast. The second thing. And the third thing, and the most important thing, is the scope for reform. Okay? So why? Like I said, Chinese economy is like 8-cylinder engine. There's only three running. The rest were held back. By whom? I think Ronald Reagan has a great phrase. Anybody remember? He came to power in early 80s. U.S. economy was in very bad shape, right? Hyperinflation, huge inflation, recession. What he did was, he said, government is the problem. And he lowered taxes, he removed a lot of regulation, and then the U.S. economy took off for the next 20 years. So China, in my personal view, is the government play a too bigger role in allocating resources in the economy. Okay? So you can see a lot of things are controlled. Prices are controlled. Interest rate are controlled. Exchange rate are controlled, right? So, and the local government evaluation is based on GDP. One and only GDP. So if they're driven by GDP, then all their incentive is to sell land, build infrastructure, and get cheap money from banks, right, which is run by government. There are a lot of profitable industries are monopolized, banking, telecommunication, energy. So there are all kinds of things that are controlled by the government. And we know if they control the allocation resources, there are a lot of waste, right? There are a lot of, they're killing innovation, they're killing competition. But if you think about Chinese economy, the part of the economy that is not controlled by the government is hugely exciting, is hugely dynamic, hugely creative. You think everybody in China will use WeChat. That has, hundreds of millions of people using that. It's much more efficient, much better than the WhatsApp, right, in the US, Twitters, right? Because the internet industry was not much regulated. So there are a lot of creativity, like China's PayPal, so if the government, they just allow the private economy do more, take it back, let the visible hand of the government, come back, push back a little bit, let the invisible hand of the market allocate resource, I think the potential is much huge. Now, will that happen? Okay, this is the question. Of course, people would say, everybody says China has huge potential, but the potential was never fully realized. Okay, 100 years ago, China seems to be rising, but now we're still rising. Okay, why we think change can happen? Okay, now I believe change can happen for the fundamental reason just people want better life. They want a better life, and the government has to deliver that. And they know that. And if you look at the third plenum last year and the Lianghui this year, right? you look at the government policies. I was very encouraged by certain words used. And the first thing is the market be the sort of key driver for allocating resources, right? It was never sort of explicit that, government market has to be like a dominant factor in allocating resource, right? It also talks about the protection of private property, right? It talks about the rule of law. The government has to be a service-oriented, right? Cannot just be sort of, be the dictator, right? So I think there's a desire, there's a incentive to change. If you look at the current leaders, right, Xi and Li, right? So I think they're different from the previous ones for different reasons. One is they have 10 years ahead of them, right? You cannot just, you cannot just kick the can down the road, right? You have to solve the problem. And secondly, it becomes clear and clear to Chinese people. If you talk to them, it's very different from when I left, right? In this internet world, right? People go abroad, they see what's happening, they see how the other countries are running, so they raise there's all kinds of demand, right? So for change. So therefore, I believe because the current model is running into issues, they will have strong incentive to change, and because the fundamental size of the Chinese market, the drive of the Chinese people for better living, and so I think there's a huge room, a huge potential can be unleashed if the government goes through this reform. Okay, so I personally, I'm actually very excited about being in China, because in my personal view, I could be wrong, the rise of China is one of the most important events in human history, in modern human history. To me, the first most important event in human history is the Industrial Revolution, the rise of Europe. Okay? The Industrial Revolution, UK, Germany, the rise of Europe become modern civilization, modern society. And the second one is the rise of America. America become the dominant world superpower through its dynamic economic system, through its market-driven system. I think the third thing will be the rise of China. Given the scope, the depths of the Chinese market, given the drive of the Chinese economy, because imagine China's income goes to $20,000, $40,000. What kind of demand, what kind of drive, economic engine for growth that would be, right? So that's why I come here. We are a business school in China, but we actually position ourselves as a world-class business school actually for the world. We provide insight about China. I'm here. We actually talk to some of the young Korean students who are interested in studying, working in China. So we're here talking to business people. I believe there's huge potential of doing things in China, with China. So I hope that my talk will help you, will give you my personal, a longer perspective of what can happen to China, and how can you, tap into China's future through your business. I don't know how much time I have. I'm almost done. Thank you very much. Yeah.